Hello everyone, welcome back to Luso Learner. In this video we are bringing you part 1 of a two-part story titled, Goody Two Shoes. Before we start today's video, we would like to share a small update with you all. We've been working tirelessly to complete our content plan and are happy to say it's now complete. We are aiming to start releasing 4 videos a week. 3 short 10-minute videos that focus on real-world conversations of beginning students living in Portugal, that we will be releasing under our Easy Portuguese playlist. Additionally, on weekends we will produce a longer 15-minute video that provides extended exposure to the language while engaging you in an interesting short story. Originally we aimed to release more videos, but we've opted instead for a slower release schedule that allows us to have all our scripts translated and reviewed by our new native Portuguese translator to optimize our videos for European Portuguese in the way it's commonly spoken. Please bear with us, as we iron out the last kinks in our production pipeline. We hope to soon be meeting the above release schedule. We hope you enjoy the first episode of our short story playlist. If you do, please like and subscribe, and consider reading our About page on Patreon to learn more about us.
Título: Goody dos Sapatos.
Title: Goody Two Shoes.
Em certa época, o agricultor Manuel era homem muito rico.
Farmer Meanwell was at one time a very rich man.
Era proprietário de grandes campos, tinha belos rebanhos de ovelhas e muito dinheiro.
He owned large fields, and had fine flocks of sheep, and plenty of money.
Mas, de repente, toda a sua boa sorte pareceu abandoná-lo.
But all at once his good fortune seemed to desert him.
Ano após ano, as suas colheitas fracassaram, as suas ovelhas morreram.
Year after year his crops failed, his sheep died off.
E ele foi obrigado a pedir dinheiro emprestado para pagar a renda e os salários dos que trabalhavam na herdade.
And he was obliged to borrow money to pay his rent and the wages of those who worked on the farm.
Por fim, teve que vender a sua herdade, e ele ficou pior do que nunca.
At last he had to sell his farm, and he was worse off than ever.
Mas nem isso lhe rendeu dinheiro suficiente para pagar as suas dívidas.
But even this did not bring him in money enough to pay his debts.
Entre aqueles que emprestaram dinheiro ao agricultor Manuel estavam o Sr. Thomas Grip e um agricultor chamado Graspal.
Among those who had lent money to farmer Meanwell was Sir Thomas Gripe, and a farmer named Graspel.
O Sr. Thomas era um homem muito rico e o agricultor Graspal tinha mais dinheiro do que lhe conseguia dar uso.
Sir Thomas was a very rich man indeed, and farmer Graspel had more money than he could possibly use.
Mas ambos eram muito gananciosos e cobiçosos e particularmente rígidos com aqueles que lhes deviam algo.
But they were both very greedy and covetous, and particularly hard on those who owed him anything.
O agricultor Graspal insultava o agricultor Manuel e chamava-lhe todo o tipo de nomes horríveis.
Farmer Graspel abused farmer Meanwell and called him all sorts of dreadful names.
Mas o rico Sr. Thomas Grip era ainda mais cruel e queria que o pobre devedor fosse para a prisão.
But the rich Sir Thomas Gripe was more cruel still, and wanted the poor debtor sent to prison.
Por isso, o pobre agricultor Manuel teve de sair à pressa do sítio onde tinha vivido tantos anos para fugir desses homens gananciosos.
So, poor farmer Meanwell had to hasten from the place where he had lived for so many years, in order to get out of the way of these greedy men.
Ele foi para a próxima vila, levando consigo a sua mulher e os seus 2 filhos pequenos.
He went to the next village, taking his wife and his 2 little children with him.
Mas embora estivesse livre do Grip e do Graspal, não estava livre de problemas e preocupações.
But though he was free from Gripe and Graspel, he was not free from trouble and care.
Rapidamente adoeceu e quando se apercebeu de que não conseguia arranjar comida e roupa para a sua família.
He soon fell ill, and when he realized that he would be unable to obtain food and clothes for his family,
Piorou cada vez mais e rapidamente morreu.
he grew worse and soon died.
A sua mulher não conseguiu aguentar a perda do seu marido,
His wife could not bear the loss of her husband,
que ela tanto amava, e morreu em poucos dias.
whom she loved so dearly, and in a few days she was dead.
Os órfãos pareciam estar completamente sozinhos no mundo.
The 2 orphan children seemed to be left entirely alone in the world,
Sem ninguém para tomar conta deles ou cuidar deles, exceto o seu Pai Celestial.
with no one to look after them, or care for them, but their heavenly Father.
Andavam de mãos dadas e quando mais pobres ficavam.
They trotted around hand in hand, and the poorer they became.
Mais se agarravam um ao outro.
The more they clung to each other.
Eram tão pobres, esfarrapados e tinham tanta fome.
They were so poor, ragged and very hungry.
O Tommy tinha 2 sapatos, mas a Margaret andava descalça.
Tommy had 2 shoes, but Marjorie went barefoot.
Não tinham nada para comer exceto as bagas que cresciam na floresta.
They had nothing to eat but the berries that grew in the woods.
E os restos que recebiam das pessoas pobres da vila.
And the scraps they could get from the poor people in the village.
E à noite dormiam em celeiros ou debaixo de pilhas de feno.
And at night they slept in barns or under haystacks.
Os seus parentes ricos eram demasiado orgulhosos para reparar neles.
Their rich relations were too proud to notice them.
Mas o Sr. Smith, o sacerdote da vila onde as crianças nasceram, não era esse tipo de pessoa.
But Mr. Smith, the clergyman of the village where the children were born, was not that sort of a man.
Parente rico veio visitá-lo, cavalheiro bondoso.
A rich relation came to visit him, a kind-hearted gentleman.
E o sacerdote contou-lhe tudo sobre o Tommy e a Margaret.
And the clergyman told him all about Tommy and Marjorie.
O cavalheiro bondoso teve pena deles e encomendou par de sapatos para a Margaret.
The kind gentleman pitied them, and ordered Marjorie a pair of shoes.
E deu dinheiro ao Sr. Smith para lhe comprar algumas roupas, de que ela, lamentavelmente, precisava muito.
And gave Mr. Smith money to buy her some clothes, which she sadly needed.
Quanto ao Tommy, disse que eu levaria com ele para o mar, e faria dele marinheiro.
As for Tommy, he said he would take him off to sea with him, and make him a sailor.
Após alguns dias, o cavalheiro disse que tinha de ir a Londres.
After a few days, the gentleman said he must go to London.
E levaria o Tommy consigo, e a despedida entre as 2 crianças foi triste.
And would take Tommy with him, and the parting between the 2 children was sad.
A pobre Margaret sentiu-se muito sozinha, sem o seu irmão.
Poor Marjorie felt very lonely without her brother.
E poderia ter ficado doente de tanto chorar, não fossem os novos sapatos que lhe foram trazidos.
And might have cried herself sick but for the new shoes that were brought home to her.
Eles desviaram-lhe os pensamentos da sua dor.
They turned her thoughts from her grief.
E assim que ela os calçou,
And as soon as she had put him on,
correu para a casa da Sra. Smith e exclamou:
she ran into Mrs. Smith and cried out,
2 sapatos, minha senhora, 2 sapatos.
2 shoes, ma'am, 2 shoes.
Ela repetia estas palavras para todos com que se cruzava.
These words she repeated to everyone she met.
E foi assim que recebeu o nome Goody dos sapatos.
And thus it was she got the name of Goody Two Shoes.
A pequena Margaret viu como o Sr. Smith era bom e sábio.
Little Marjorie had seen how good and wise Mr. Smith was.
E achou que era por causa do seu grande conhecimento.
And thought it was because of his great learning.
E queria, acima de tudo, aprender a ler.
And she wanted, above all things, to learn to read.
Finalmente, decidiu pedir ao Sr. Smith
At last she made up her mind to ask Mr. Smith
para ensiná-la quando ele tivesse tempo.
to teach her when he had a moment to spare.
Ele prontamente concordou em fazer isso.
He readily agreed to do this.
E a Margaret lia para ele 1 hora todos os dias.
And Marjorie read to him an hour every day.
E passava muito tempo com os seus livros.
And spent much time with her books.
Então, ela elaborou plano para ensinar outros, mais ignorantes do que ela.
Then she laid out a plan for teaching others, more ignorant than herself.
A partir de pedaços finos de madeira fez 10 conjuntos de letras grandes e pequenas do alfabeto.
She cut out of thin pieces of wood 10 sets of large and small letters of the alphabet.
E levava-os consigo quando ia de casa em casa.
And carried these with her when she went from house to house.
Quando chegava à casa do Billy Wilson, ela atirava as letras todas num monte.
When she came to Billy Wilson's, she threw down the letters all in a heap.
E o Billy pegava nelas e organizava-as em linhas.
And Billy picked him out and sorted them in lines.
E assim por diante até que todas as letras estivessem nos lugares certos.
And so on until all the letters were in their right places.
De lá, a Goody dos sapatos ia para outra casa de campo.
From there, Goody Two Shoes trotted off to another cottage.
E aí várias crianças esperavam por ela.
And here were several children waiting for her.
Assim que a menina entrava,
As soon as the little girl came in,
Eles concentravam-se todas em redor dela,
they all crowded around her,
ansiosas por começar imediatamente as aulas.
eager to begin their lessons at once.
Então ela atirava as letras para o chão e dizia ao menino ao seu lado:
Then she threw the letters on the ground, and said to the boy next her,
O que comeste hoje ao almoço?
What did you have for lunch today?
Pão, respondia o menino.
Bread, answered the little boy.
Então põe a primeira letra, dizia a Goody dos sapatos.
Well, put down the first letter, said Goody Two Shoes.
Ele punha o P e a próxima criança o E e a próxima o O.
He put down B, and the next child R, and the next E, and the next A, and the next D.
E lá estava a palavra inteira pão.
And there was the whole word, bread.
O que comeste ao almoço, Polly Driggs?
What did you have for lunch, Polly Driggs?
Tarte de maçã, dizia Polly.
Apple pie, said Polly.
Após o qual punha a primeira letra T e a próxima punha um O e a próxima um R.
Upon which she laid down the first letter, A, and the next put down a P.
E assim por diante até que as palavras tarte de maçã serem unidas, e estivesse lá, tarte de maçã.
And the next another P, and so on until the words apple and pie were united, and stood thus, apple pie.
Certa noite aconteceu que a Goody dos sapatos ia para casa muito tarde.
Now it happened one evening that Goody Two Shoes was going home rather late.
Tinha feito percurso mais longo que o habitual e toda a gente a tinha feito esperar.
She had made a longer round than usual, and everybody had kept her waiting.
De modo que anoiteceu antes que o seu trabalho estivesse concluído.
So that night came on before her day's work was done.
Ela estava muito contente por ir para a sua própria casa.
She was glad to set out for her own home.
E caminhava satisfeita pelos campos, vielas e estradas.
And she walked along contentedly through the fields, and lanes, and roads.
Desfrutando da noite tranquila.
Enjoying the quiet evening.
A noite não estava fria,
The evening was not cool,
mas abafada e sufocante e anunciava tempestade.
but close and sultry, and announced a storm.
De repente, uma gota caiu na cara da Goody.
Suddenly, a drop fell on the face of Goody.
O que deveria ela fazer?
What should she do?
Se ela não se apressasse, rapidamente ficaria encharcada até aos ossos.
If she did not make haste, she would soon be wet to the bones.
Felizmente, havia velho celeiro ao fundo da estrada,
Fortunately, there was an old barn down the road,
onde ela se poderia abrigar.
where she could find shelter.
E a Goody dos sapatos levantou as saias, e começou a correr como se alguém a estivesse a perseguir.
And Goody Two Shoes lifted up her skirts, and took off running as if somebody was after her.
O dono do celeiro tinha morrido recentemente.
The owner of the barn had died lately,
E a propriedade ia ser vendida.
and the property was to be sold,
E havia muito feno solto no chão que ainda não tinha sido removido.
and there was a lot of loose hay on the floor which had not yet been taken away.
A Goody dos sapatos aconchegou-se no feno macio,
Goody Two Shoes cuddled down in the soft hay,
feliz pela chance de poder descansar os seus membros cansados.
glad for the chance to rest her tired limbs,
E completamente sem fôlego devido à sua longa corrida.
and completely out of breath due to her long run.
E nesse momento a chuva começou a cair.
And just then the rain began to fall.
Os trovões ribombaram e houve clarões de relâmpagos.
The thunder roared and there were flashes of lightning,
E o velho celeiro tremeu e a Goody dos sapatos também.
and the old barn trembled, and so did Goody Two Shoes.
Não estava lá há muito tempo quando ouviu passos.
She had not been there long before she heard footsteps,
E 3 homens entraram no celeiro para se abrigar.
and 3 men came into the barn for shelter.
O feno estava empilhado entre ela e eles, de modo que eles não a conseguiam ver.
The hay was piled up between her and them, so that they could not see her.
E pensando que estavam sozinhos, falaram muito alto.
And, thinking they were alone, they spoke quite loudly. Thank you for listening. Watch out for part 2 of Goody Two Shoes this weekend. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us to reach more people with our content. Thank you, have a great day.